Not to put you on the spot, but do you have an example of that? That's really interesting to me. The idea that someone would maybe come in with a preconceived notion about why police are doing what they're doing,
Sure.
and then they get more information, it changes their perspective. If you have an
You
example.
know, I do. We have a program we do with the community called Game Changer. It's a great program where the only challenges with it is that it's limited to a relatively small number of people at a time when I'd love to be able to see us take this across the country and replicate it. But it brings young people from areas that have had challenges, some that are gang involved, some that are, in areas that have bigger challenges as it relates to public safety and so many other things, poverty and the education system, the medical access, and on and on. But it brings them in and sits them down with police officers, deputy sheriffs, and others, and they would not have a reason to come together otherwise. And they sit down and they talk and they air their complaints and their grievances and why is this happening, why are you doing. And it starts out with, a feeling of tension sometimes in the room, a feeling of, you're not going to listen to us, or I have an impression of what you're going to be like. And that you're is, the other person, whether it's the police officer looking at the community member looking at the police officer, and they have expectations in their head as to what the answer is going to be from the person they're talking to. And when you listen and you hear what the other person is saying, all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense because now you have had the time and the opportunity to be able to hear the other perspective. Too often in our society today, we don't hear the other perspective. You hear one side and that becomes the narrative. I think the more we can engage with people that we have the privilege to serve, the better off we'll all be because we need the public's help. And if we don't get that help, then you end up in a situation like we saw 2020, 2021, and 22. I think we're starting to come out of that now, thankfully. I think there's an awareness now that there wasn't just 2 years ago, but it'll take a period of time for that to roll out in a way that I think we all benefit from that.
If programs like the Game Changer are useful, maybe just elaborate a bit more about the context of the community members meeting with police officers. What kind of event is it?
Yeah.
What are they doing together?
No,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we bring people in, and it's a great program. It's not our program. It's a community-generated program. And these people from policing will be invited in, and then you'll have members of the community come in. They're generally, in my experience, have been younger people, early 20s for the most part. And they'll come in and they'll sit down in kind of a classroom environment or around a horseshoe table and be able to have some dialogue back and forth in that regard. And then after you do this for an hour and a half, you get there's some food, you get something to eat together, and then you go to a ball game. And I think that is a big difference in just bringing people together to a community room, to a community event. But when you have something where you start off with two almost opposing sides or two sides that don't understand each other, you have an opportunity to communicate. And then you have an opportunity to communicate while having some food as well. And then from there, go into a ball game where you sit with each other. The cops don't sit hopefully on one side and the community members on the other, but you sit together and you go through a life experience watching a ball game, something as all-American as we could hope for, but an environment that you wouldn't find yourself in otherwise, an environment that is relaxed, an environment where you're focused on something externally, the ball game in this case, but you're talking about things that are important to all of you. And you leave there with a sense, at least in my experience and from what I've read about Game Changer in other places, an ability to be able to see things in greater detail than you did before, and to be able to hear stories or accounts of something happening and maybe being able to share a little bit more on maybe why that happened or what the police were thinking when they did this or why they did this, because we do not do a good job of explaining the why. Why did we do this? We do it because there's a reason for most everything that's done out there, unless somebody's abusing the system. But 99% of the time, people out there are trained to do certain things because of what's happened in the past, and you want to prevent those kind of things from happening again.